Hello and welcome to Sir Astro's Painting. In this video I'll be painting Luke Skywalker from the new Rebel Alliance starter set for the Star Wars Legion miniatures game by Atomic Mass Games. And for ideas on how to paint some of the other figures that come in the box, you can find a link in the video description. Let's begin. As usual, I like to prime the figure in black, followed with some grey and white Zenith style highlights applied from a roughly overhead angle. A plain prime with a rattle can would also be fine, however. We can also save time by brightening up the lightsaber here with some white. I'm going to start the painting with what is really quite an optional detail, the eyes, which we don't need to paint at all for gaming purposes, but for photography or display, painting them well can make quite a difference. My approach here is to first use an off-white to paint the whites of the eyes. We can then use some black to carefully trim the eyes back, allowing us to more easily shape the eyes, whilst also providing some dark lining to help them stand out. Then comes the trickiest part, placing a pupil in each eye, which is essentially a small vertical stroke dividing the eye in two. The brush I'm using here is actually just an old size 2 by Rosemary & Co, which has grown thin over time. I don't always get the eyes right first time like this, and will sometimes end up going back and forth with the black and white. Next I'm going to paint the skin, and you should of course use whatever your go-to Caucasian skin tones might be. I'm starting with a base tone mix of pink and golden flesh, darkened with some burnt sienna umber. I'm now building up to a mid-tone mix of the pink and golden flesh tones. Along the way, I'm mixing in some red to create a more pinkish tone for the lips. Before going any further, I've chosen to paint the hair to help me better judge the skin tone values. For that, I'm using a mix of black brown and dark golden brown. I'm also adding some eyebrows with this, which will typically require some tidying up with the surrounding skin tone afterwards. I'm now continuing to push the values up with the addition of some vanilla white. And I often like to mix in a hint of a cooler tone such as Prussian Blue for the chin area. I'm also providing some more bluish light here for the right hand, which is closest to the lightsaber. And I'm continuing to push the highlights and refine the volumes. Once again, you don't need to go this far to achieve a good tabletop standard. I just happen to really enjoy painting faces. I'm now going to highlight the hair, firstly up to a mid-tone mix of dark golden brown and golden brown, before adding some pale yellow for the brighter highlights. Naturally, I'm getting brighter towards the top of the head. I'm now mixing in the pale yellow, and I typically like to go pretty bright when highlighting hair. Moving on to the outfit, I'm first using plain black to paint the inner top, belt, holster and the boots. Along the way, I decided to mix in some warm grey and provide some quick highlights for the top. Next I'm painting the trousers using Mahogany darkened with some black. And for the jacket, which has a somewhat desaturated yellow colour, I'm using golden brown darkened with just a little dark purple. I'm now going to highlight the jacket by mixing in some pale yellow along with a touch of warm yellow to control the saturation. It's worth noting that the paint will appear somewhat darker once dry. You could certainly take a faster approach here by using a wash or speed paint. I just chose the manual highlighting approach to help achieve the very specific hue that I'm after. These central trims are actually a shade darker than the rest of the jacket. I also had to redefine some of these recessed lines with the shadow tone. A gentle bit of texture here would also be fine. It's a subtle touch, but here I'm creating a hint of yellow cast on the face. And these are my last couple of highlights. Next I'm going to highlight the trousers using a mix of light umber and burnt orange. I'm now adding the yellow stripes down each side, and then breaking these up into thin strips with the dark brown. We can then go ahead and highlight the remaining black areas with a simple grayscale. I'm also mixing in a little blue and pushing the values up nice and high for the shinier textures. Naturally, I'll be going nice and bright for the buckle here, as well as the shiny reflections on the boots. We can also use the same grayscale for the handle of the lightsaber. And I'm loosely painting the debris on the base. I'm now going to paint the blade of the lightsaber, firstly by providing a fresh undercoat of pure white. We can then mix in some blue tones. Here I'm using a mix of blue and turquoise to provide some colour. There are several approaches you could take here, and simply covering the whole blade with a pale blue is a nice easy option. I often like to leave a white strip along the length of the blade on the side that matches the most commonly viewed angle, typically the front, to create the illusion of a blue glow. I'm now just boosting the pale blue light on the right hand. Next I'm providing some basing to match the rest of the army, using some brown earth basing paste by Vallejo, followed with some additional debris, a sprinkling of cork rocks and some modelling sand. Notice I'm leaving the finest sand for last. Once dry, we can seal the basing with some thinned PVA glue or Mod Podge. Before providing a brown shade and some light dry brushing to boost the contrast. And after painting the rim of the base in black, I decided to gently boost the levels of blue on the blade and refine one or two highlights on the boots. And this completes Luke Skywalker. Thank you so much for joining me. As usual, you'll find a full product list in the video description, along with links to all of the places I can be found online. Join me again soon as we continue painting miniatures from Star Wars Legion. Happy painting!